You're listening to the Today's Eden podcast, episode 7. Hey, what's up, guys? I am super excited. Oh, I'm too excited. Gotta bring it in a little bit. This episode is with Molly and Mary Claire, and they talk about motherhood and serving alongside being a mother and including their family in service. They are the founders of the North Hill Ministry for local refugees. And it's just a super inspiring episode. For me, it was very relational in that sometimes I get caught up in the idea of motherhood and my role in that I can't exist outside of it. And so I'm really grateful that Molly and Mary Claire talk about mom guilt and how during this pursuit of their passion and service, that they really didn't have to choose one or the other, that you can do both and that everybody will be okay doing both and everybody survives. And, that there's moments that it's not so great, but then there are other moments that are awesome and amazing and that are worth the moments that are not so great. Also, they recently had a video that went viral about one of the women that they were ministering to, Alik, who was reunited with her husband, who was in a refugee camp in Egypt. And so it was really neat to hear the story and the points leading up to that moment that video shows before it happened and kind of just see it all come together. It was awesome. And to know that these women are doing that alongside of being moms, being everyday, average, like you and me women who are just stepping out in faith and thinking outside of the box and being okay with dealing with mom guilt and all the struggles that go with raising a child, meanwhile still pursuing their passion. That's very inspiring, very awesome for me to have personally been able to experience. And I hope that as you guys are listening, it's an awesome experience and something that speaks to your heart as well. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear this episode. Today's podcast is brought to you by audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/todayseden. And there you can get one of those books that we talk about at the end of the episodes when all of our guests list what their most influential book that they've read is. You can do that for free at audibletrial.com/todayseden. All right, let's get to it. Here is the episode with Molly and Mary Claire. Hey guys, I am super pumped because today I am joined by not one, but two amazing women, Mary Claire Hall and Molly Jamison. Thank you guys so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Before we get started, could you tell us a little bit about who you are, maybe some background and kind of what life stage you're at right now?
Sure. This is Mary Claire. I am, do I have to tell you how old I am? I'm 37.
You don't have to if you don't want to.
I have two little boys, Sam, who is 6, and Ben, who's 4. You will probably hear Ben at some point during this podcast because he's upstairs playing. We'll see how long that lasts. So I'm married to David, and we live in Fort Worth. And what else? We are in ministry together. I work some for David. We have a teaching discipleship ministry called Charisma Ventures, and but mostly I am mom. So that's me.
And I am Molly Jamison, and I am exactly 1 year older than Mary Claire, and I wear that badge proudly. We have the same birthday. And I have 2 little boys, Jack, who is 7, and Owen, who will be 5 next week. And my husband is Jeff. We live in Fort Worth also, and I think that's about it.
So before we get started, more talking about you guys and where you are in life and everything, I wanted to talk about your ministry and how you guys came about finding that together, finding this venture of doing some sort of service together? How did you guys decide that you kind of wanted to serve and join your families together in doing that?
Yeah. Well, Mary Claire and I, we live in the same neighborhood and gotten to be friends. And in 2011, we're both just kind of looking for a way for us to serve with our families, because it seems like there's so many service opportunities where have to get a babysitter or leave the dad at home so that you can go and do something. And just in that stage of life with little kiddos, we were looking for something that we could all do together. And we both had a few friends who worked at Catholic Charities and suggested to us that we look into the refugee mentoring program. So we went through the training with that, and honestly, it took us a few years. I think we started the process before we had our youngest children, and obviously hit pause for a little bit, and then picked it back up when the little boys were, I guess, little, 1.5 months, one, something like that. Anyway, details. So anyway, we went through the refugee mentoring program, orientation, whatever, and specifically suggested or requested that we be paired with somebody who had children about our kids' age. So that was kind of how we, jumped off into it, mainly because we wanted to be able to serve with our families.
Was there a specific reason that you wanted to do that, to have the kids involved?
One of the biggest things was specifically going through Catholic Charities is, we live in the city in Fort Worth, Texas, and, there's some diversity, but there's not a whole lot. Mary Claire and I both traveled and did missions work overseas before having kids. And, after having kids, at least for a while, you kind of put a halt to that. And so we saw a great opportunity just to be able to introduce our kids to different parts of the world without having to actually put them on an airplane, which sounded really good at the time.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
I think, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that, Molly answered that really well when she was describing how we got involved. We just did not want our kids on the sidelines, both for our benefit and theirs. We just knew, to be totally and completely honest, one of the motivations is probably laziness or ease of life, because we chose someplace that was close by, and we chose someplace that we could have our kids involved, because knowing ourselves really well, if it involved getting a babysitter or having even a specific time that you had to go, like every Tuesday night at 8:00, you're going to go somewhere to serve, or Wednesday morning at 11. Our schedules just did not work that way. And I think anybody with small kids knows that that's really tough. It would have been way too easy to be like, I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z this week. It's just too hard. The baby's cranky, or we're changing nap times or whatever. And so we really needed to find something that was close by, that we could kind of pick the schedule, that there wasn't, we didn't want to really fit into a box, to be honest. And so this was a really good way to involve the kids, and to really, call each other up and be like, hey, do you want to go visit our friend today? And no, it's not a good day for me. Okay, well, we'll try again tomorrow. That kind of system worked really well for us to do together and with our kids. So I think a lot of moms could probably relate to that, of finding something that just works, that's easy. And there's nothing wrong with finding something that fits in with your lifestyle. And that was one of the motivating factors for us.
Right. And so this volunteerism sort of thing actually turned into a ministry that you guys created. So at what point did you realize that this was more than just meeting with a family? Like, this was turning into something that was stirring in your heart to create the North Hill?
Yeah. Well, once we went through the orientation, we got paired with a woman who lived not far from us in a Section 8 apartment complex. And she had 2 kids just like us. One of them was 5 and one of them was 2 when we met, which was, not far off from the ages of our kiddos. And so once a week we kind of committed to going over to visit her. And it was awkward. Like, she spoke no English. There were, between the 3 of us, 6 kids running around, 6 kids who needed something all the time, 6 kids,
Right.
6 kids is a lot.
Yeah.
But so we would just go, and she spoke no English, and we clearly spoke no Arabic or Dinka. And so we would just kind of sit and smile at each other. And
she was, this is Mary Claire, sorry, I'm interrupting, but she was pregnant at the time. And so we did a whole lot of like pointing and rubbing bellies and like, oh, baby, and sign language and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was super awkward.
Yeah. And so it definitely was not easy. As easy as we tried to make it, with taking out a lot of the excuses that you would typically have, it was still awkward and not easy. And there were a lot of times when we just went because we were being obedient instead of going because, we just wanted to go. It's hard to feel like you want to go into an awkward situation. So like Mary Claire said, when she got here, she found out she was pregnant. And kind of the backstory on her is she is a refugee from Sudan. And so they fled in the Civil War, and she and her husband were married through the church, but they were not married in the eyes of the state. And so when they checked into a refugee camp, they were separated into, he was a single man and she was a single mother. And so she, a refugee who is a single mother is definitely going to go to the front of the line, while a single man will go all the way to the back. And so they came over without him. And when she got here, shortly after, she found out she was pregnant.
Wow.
So that's just kind of like her backstory. And so we met her after she found out she was pregnant. And so we were in the same home group. And so we got our home group involved a little bit and did a baby shower, and which the doctor told her she was having a girl. And so we did a huge baby shower. Everything was pink. You have a little girl. Like
Pepto-Bismol threw up in her apartment.
It's hard to get like pink when you're doing baby shower for a little girl. So anyway, we did that and had committed to help her get to the hospital when it was time, and took her to a few doctor's appointments, whatever. So 2 of our home group girls took her to the hospital and checked her in when it was time to have the baby. She was having a scheduled induction, which you want to talk about. But anyway, so they dropped her off and got her settled. And Mary Claire and I thought the next day, we definitely weren't expecting a phone call because, like I said, she doesn't speak English very well. So we thought we'll just pop in and check on her and meet the baby and whatever. So we walked into the hospital room, and she was all by herself, about to push the baby out. Like, no doctors, no nurses, nothing. Just
oh my gosh.
In transition, basically. So Mary Claire and I, both having just had children, like, popped into, birthing mode. I don't know. One of us ran and got the doctors. The other one, was with her. And anyway, long story short, we were in the hospital room when the baby was born, got to catch the baby, got to hold her hand through the birthing process. It was, one of the top moments of, I would say, both of our lives.
Absolutely.
And on the way home from that, we were like, well, don't think that you just leave a mom who just had a baby and you got the baby. Like, you're kind of for life.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not casual anymore after that. It's like you are, bound forever. And I think, that's the point where I think all 3 of us, our friend included, would say, okay, now we're sisters.
Yeah, I think both of us, Mary Claire and I, both would have taken that baby home, in a heartbeat, and still would. But at that moment, you just feel so connected and kindred to somebody.
Yeah.
I would say that was the transition point. Your question was, where did it become more than just volunteering casually? And that probably for both of us in our hearts had, that's where the change took place, because this is not a thing to do anymore. This is a person. This is a sister. This is, and so that really sort of changed the trajectory a little bit. The other thing is we noticed almost since we first started visiting her that she was never alone in her apartment. There were always these women visiting her. And so we were starting to meet her neighbors. And women would gather with their kids in their living room.
Yeah, so there's like 17 kids running around.
Yeah, which was so much fun and very as uncomfortable and unfamiliar as many things are. Like women getting together for a play date is cross-cultural.
Right, yeah.
Because they were, it's their community. It's just like we do when, when you are lonely with little kids running around, you gather your women, together and talk and about those crazy children and drink coffee together. And so there was a familiarity in that. The other thing that we noticed is that at this apartment complex, nobody was outside. Like nobody was ever outside. It was this very sad place until you got inside somebody's apartment and living room and saw the community. And so that started us thinking about, okay, there's this robust community that happens here, but can we leverage that in any way? And so started thinking about ways that we could meet more people. And the other thing we saw is that how they helped one another. So whereas we would sort of wonder, what our friend needed, and go and see how we could, meet some of those needs. A lot of times we would get into her apartment and one of her neighbors had helped her with that very need. And so we were already seeing this neat community that was there and wondering if we could leverage that to get to know more people and for more of the neighbors to meet one another, because it was very much community even there that was based on sort of ethnic lines. So can we see if we can get more people together and get them outside? So our grand idea to do that was, what if we planted a community garden? There's like this big courtyard there at the apartment complex. And so we had this grand idea. We probably watched too much HGTV, stories about low-income community gardens or whatever. Right. Had no idea what we were doing.
We're not gardeners.
We are not gardeners. It was a pretty dumb idea, actually, but we went out and tried to plant this community garden. We have a master gardener in our neighborhood that came out and helped us with it, which was kind of cool. She's not a believer, and so that was great in and of itself to kind of minister to her and let her see those kinds of things. So she came out with her husband and some other home group members, and we started planting this garden. And it did, although the garden is no more. It's about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
But what it did serve the purpose of bringing people outside. So, they basically wanted to come out and see what the crazy white people were doing and laugh at us, I think. But they came out and we started meeting them and they started meeting us. And this lady who doesn't live there anymore brought out, she's Afghani, and she brought out tea for everybody, and it was just those really cool moments of oh, wow, this could be really exciting and really good. And so though the garden was no more, or is no more, it served its purpose, and then we saw that could kind of work. And so what we decided to do instead was to just do cookouts, basically. And so, I don't know, did we deliver flyers that first time?
Probably not.
So we just decided, Molly bought this dinky little grill, and we just got our home group to buy hot dogs and went out and just started grilling hot dogs to see who would come out.
Yeah.
And all the kids came that first time, and it was so much fun. We didn't see hardly any adults that first time, but they sent their children out. And so we were like, gosh, this could work. And so we started making that kind of a regular thing. I don't know how many times we did it that
we
spring.
probably did it 3 or 4 times that spring.
Yeah.
Kind of seasonally because, it's hot in Texas.
Right. And so we, just started getting to know the kids and started building some relationships and making connections. And
I would definitely say, sorry, Ashley.
No, I was just going to say, was it a little bit easier to communicate with the kids versus the adults at this time? Or?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
The kids, they go to school and learn English so quickly because there's, kids can do things like that. And since then, it's been a huge difference with the parents. It used to be they would sit on their porches and watch to make sure we weren't going to snatch their children,
right.
and that we were just really going to give them a hot dog and play with them. But since then, a lot of them will come out and say hello, even if they can't speak English all that well. They're much more comfortable in their minimal English than they were, 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I feel like for each of these things that Mary Claire has talked about, it's been such a gift from the Lord because we have just literally been obedient in the scary and random things. Like showing up in an apartment complex with 200 hot dogs and you don't even know what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
But then seeing how the Lord 100% has blessed each of the things that we feel like we've been awkwardly called to do,
Yeah. And it hasn't been every single thing. There are a lot of things like the garden died. We would try. We tell people all the time we have no idea what we're doing. We're just gonna it's kind of throwing stuff up on a wall and seeing what sticks. And the things that stick, have really. It's totally been the Lord that, like Molly said, blessing it and growing it. We did not even at this point, we weren't let's form a ministry together. We were just kind of taking the next step. And I think that's a really important part in the story is that if you had told me, and when did we start? We were trying to do the timeline before we got on the call. We were like, gosh, it seems like we've been doing this forever, but it really hadn't been that long.
3 years ago.
So 3 years ago, if you had looked at me and said, you are going to have a ministry called the North Hill, and there's going to be 100 qualified volunteers that you manage, and there's going to be 300 kids that you give Christmas gifts to, and Molly is going to do this piece of it, and you're going to do this piece of it, and y'all are going to work together, and you're going to just use the play dates with your kids to have business meetings, and you're going to have a website and logo and all of this stuff. I would have slapped you, and said, well, no, and I'm not interested. That's too much. I'm overwhelmed. Get out of my face. I have little kids. Really, it would have been no, how could I? But what's been so eye-opening and great about this is exactly what Molly said. It's just you take the next step, and it's if that was of the Lord, then He will equip you and provide all that you need to take that step. And it's not going to feel overwhelming. And it's not, there are times that we feel overwhelmed for sure, but it might not be comfortable. It might stretch you, but it's not going to be too much. And so we just never thought we're going to create something here. It was just one tiny step after another. Sometimes big steps, but just taking the next step, not really with a view of this is our end goal.
Product,
we're trying to create this thing that looks exactly like this, because what I would have said I wanted to create in 2011, 2012 would be very different from what it ended up being. I just didn't even have the vision or capacity to see what it ended up being. And so I think that's important,
especially moms with little kids, that obedient in the next step is all you're called to do.
Exactly.
You're not called to be obedient in 4 years down the line. Right. You're called to be obedient in what the Lord is saying is next, which is hard because the days are long, and we all want to know what our future will look like, and that's part of it. Is just having to trust the Lord that being obedient to what He's called you to at this moment is exactly enough.
Yeah, I think that's important in our story, just
Mm-hmm.
in our friendship, because I can't help but look like I'm a planner.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to start something that I don't know is going to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
This is very clear, by the way. Like, I want to know if it's going to be successful. Is it going to be worth it? Is it worth my time? Is it worth my energy? What's it going to look like down the road? That's just how my mind works.
Mm-hmm.
And Molly was way more open to, hey, let's just see if this works. Like, let's just go for it. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. And if it, like, it doesn't mean we have to do it for the rest of our lives, but let's try it this once. And that was super uncomfortable for me. I mean, we had to work through conflict with that too.
It was like, we always said, this is our second marriage to each other.
Yes.
Working through our conflict.
It really, and so it took a while to see her gifting in that of, and willingness to just step out, like matched my hesitancy. And have we dotted the I's and crossed the T's, which that piece is important too, because you want to
do it well.
You want to do it well, and you want to see see a little bit of a trajectory. Like, is this, are there unintended consequences? Are there, and which is the way my mind works. And so, but it took a lot of, I think, building trust with one another.
Totally.
Like, that I'm not out to get Molly and like crush her dreams.
Yeah.
Right. She's not out to like take away, like my control, and all of that. And just seeing that God perfectly equipped her and gave her these big visions, and then equipped me to kind of put some of the structure around them maybe, and think through them. And seeing how that, like, if we are submitted to Him and trust one another and see the best in one another, how that works really, really well. And it's sort of like a synergy. Like, we can do way more. Like, I think both of us say we couldn't ever have done this without the other.
Right. Yeah.
And so, just to appreciate and love and celebrate each other's gifts, and to trust one another with it, and to support one another in it and celebrate one another, has been a big part of how this has worked. But it's been a huge journey that I think one time we were like in the middle of like, conflict, which neither one of us like. Is super uncomfortable. And I think Molly said something like, I mean, planning a play date together is like, this stuff doesn't come up, when you're just like, let's get our kids together to play,
right.
This kind of stuff doesn't bubble up to the surface, like it does when you're, and I think that probably there's some spiritual warfare that was involved with that and all of that. But, I think I apologized to my kids the most. And then David second and Molly third. I say ask for people's forgiveness, like in that order. Like, always from my kids, a lot of times from David, and a lot of times from Molly too.
How do you guys balance doing the ministry? Because I know you said like now you have like 300 kids, and obviously the parents that go with that you're kind of ministering to. So how do you balance that? Meanwhile, taking care of your home and your family and your own household. How do you go back and forth?
I mean, a big blessing to what the Lord has grown this to is that a lot of the things our kids and our family are involved in. And so we take them along with us to do different things. Now, that does not mean that my house is clean. And that does not mean that, I have a home-cooked meal on the table every single night. And there are definitely some things that fall through the crack. I finally got one of those robot vacuums because...
Oh, yeah, those are awesome.
Clean. So there's definitely some things that fall through the cracks, as far as that goes. Mary Claire and I were talking before we started. And, part of being a parent, especially in 2016 with, Instagram, Facebook, and blogs and all these things that you are supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be throwing the perfect party. You're supposed to be having all these, Whole30 Pinterest style meals that are like plated with swirls of things, and it does not happen. We definitely do things the best that we can, but we were just talking that we feel like it's okay for our kids not to be the center of attention all the time. We feel like it's okay for our husbands to see us working and doing something that they know that the Lord has called us to, and, order pizza instead of chicken and veggies. And so there is a balance with that. I definitely think that a lot of it comes down to being comfortable with that, like being comfortable that sometimes we send our kids upstairs to play by themselves while we sit and have a meeting. And I think that's a lot of it is there is a balance, and sometimes it's easier than others. Sometimes it's, take out every night and that's not good, but it is okay.
Yeah. I totally 100% agree with that. I think ultimately, it's great for our families. We just live in a culture, like Molly said, that where your kid thinks that they're the center of the universe. I mean, kids think that anyway because people think that anyway. I mean, we're just all hardwired in our sinful, fallen selves to believe that we're the center of the story. And so, do I want to neglect my kids? No way. But I think that the times where they have to give and the times that they don't have my entire attention because I'm doing something good. Now, I mean, if I'm on Facebook all day on my phone, which I'm not, which sometimes I am, and it happens, then maybe that's not a good neglect, but maybe there is a good neglect, where it's like you are not the center of the story because everything else is screaming at them that they are the center of the story and that they are the little kings of their, like Paul David Tripp says, a claustrophobic kingdom of one. And anything that I can do as a parent to give them a different narrative is a good thing, even if that looks like they don't get my undivided attention, and I'm not going to haul them around to every single art class and music class and soccer game and everything else that there is potential for them to do that are good things. I mean, those are great things. But I think sometimes as parents we can get totally caught up in that and instead I mean, we'll see how it plays out. Like they don't blame because of this and say that mom ruined their lives. Yeah. I hope not. Yeah. And there is a balance. I mean, but honestly, they have fun out there. Sometimes they don't want to go. Yeah. I mean, sometimes
just like
it's boring. Yeah. Sometimes I don't want to go. Yeah. But at this point, what the ministry looks like on Saturday night, we had a play date out there. And so what it looks like for them a lot of the times is now you have 150 friends to run around and play with. And that's a great thing for them. Yeah. Is it organized sports? No, but they might learn to play soccer from a kid that grew up in Africa, and that's awesome. And so I don't think that either of us would say we do the balance perfectly. And there have been times where we have both had conversations with our husbands of them saying, hey, you need to scale back here. Right. Or do you remember last year where you were so strung out about serving Thanksgiving dinner at the North Hill that you didn't serve it? No, I mean, we did Thanksgiving, but and you've got to be open to those conversations too. So, we've had those, but I think ultimately it is a good thing and will be a good thing for our kids and our family life. And our husbands are involved and they're super supportive. But they do provide a balance, when we get a little bit out of control with it. Yeah. The other thing is we are not doing this alone. And that's been a whole nother learning curve of like how to bring people into this well, because as it grew, there was definitely a season where we realized like this is way more than we ever anticipated, but it was still kind of just the two of us bearing the load. of organizing all the volunteers and every single event and, managing everything. And so that's been another learning curve for both of us, how to give things away and trust other people with it. And, I think both of our husbands helped with that, where they helped us see, like, it's good for the ministry, because if one of us or both of us got hit by a bus, like, it would just end unless we train other people up and help them lead. And take pieces of it. But it's also, if you want things to grow and develop, you've got to learn how to give it away. And so at this point, we have a friend who, for the most part, manages our play dates and our cookouts. So she does, the volunteers, and she manages the donations for that and things like that. And we have 2 other girls from our home group that wanted to start an outreach to the teachers at the elementary school that these kids go to. And so they are managing that. They got, all the teachers paired up with a buddy, and they are sending out those emails, and they are creating the events for that, where we don't even, like, I got an email this morning. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Hard for, like, I tend towards control and wanting to have control. And, I hand wring a little bit about, like, is anybody going to do this? Are they going to do it well? Are they going to do it to my standards? Are they going to do what I would do? And, that's a whole different process in my heart of letting that go and trusting other people, and ultimately trusting the Lord that he is the one that owns this ministry, and he's the one that's directing its steps. And, if he trusted me with it, he can trust other people with it, And so just to kind of further answer your question, we are not doing this just the 2 of us anymore. We've got a whole slew of volunteers who I think are the best volunteers in the history of the world, like, that are carrying a lot more of the load now, and making it their own. And so long answer. Sorry.
No, that was good. I also wanted to know if there was anything in particular that you guys do intentionally for your family, just because I know that you're serving other families to make sure that, your family doesn't feel like you're paying attention to other families, or is that not even something that doesn't even cross your family's mind or thoughts? Or
I think part of it is like communicating with, thinking specifically about the kids, but like communicating with them and helping them to see the importance of doing these things. Because I think if you see value in something, then you don't necessarily feel like something is taken away from you if you're involving yourself in it. That's the biggest thing I can think of. A lot of times, a lot of the stuff that we do is during the day. When our husbands are at work, we meet during the day, we go to the complex during the day. There's a few Saturdays a month, I don't know, a Saturday or so out of the month that we end up, over there with bigger events. But a lot of it is done outside of family time, I would say.
Yeah. We have been that goes back to the original purpose.
Yeah.
The Lord has blessed us for sure in this, but we've also been pretty intentional about not siloing this into its own entity. Yeah. So it is part of family life. It's part of play dates. Like, and our kids are old enough. Like, how long have we been on the call? 37 minutes. Owen and Ben are just back there playing by themselves. They're having a great time. Yeah, I promise they don't feel neglected. Yeah. And they would feel way more like if we weren't doing this, then I would be hauling him to Target and doing my shopping or doing my laundry and doing, meals and stuff, where I'm like, go away, like, go play by yourself. And so he's having way more fun with Owen back there than if it was just me running errands with them, which is what I'm going to do with them tomorrow. Right. So I'm not saying I don't do those things, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think that the North Hill has taken a huge chunk away from our family time, just because of the way, again, it goes back to, we sort of knew ourselves well enough to know if this is going to be, I don't have an extra 3 hours a day.
Right.
So I have to find something that I can integrate into the 3 hours that are already there, if that makes sense. And sometimes it does mean a late night, but most of the time it's integrated into the life that we already had. And I think that that's a good thing for women to hear, because it's overwhelming. It even like right now, if you said you've got to add something, like a totally different thing that has nothing to do with your work, family, or North Hill or church, I would be like, no, that is off my beam. I cannot add another thing. But if it's integrated into that, and it's part of those things, and it's part of the time that Molly and I would just be spending as friends, having a cup of coffee while our kids play, well, then that's pretty easy.
Yeah.
So, I would say where you can't, if we're talking about like replication or how somebody could do something like this, which is, I think, something you want to do in your podcast, like that, that's a big piece of it, to think through, instead of viewing it as a totally separate entity or a totally new thing that you've got to do on your to-do list, like where are the time that I'm just like hanging out with my friends? Or could that be a time where we open up scripture together or something? Or, if your thing is like, I want to have a discipleship relationship or a Bible study, well, where are you already hanging out? Like, maybe that's a good time. It doesn't have to be a separate deal. Or do I want to serve? Well, I have my kids. We don't have anything scheduled, most mornings from like 9 to 11. So what's something that I can just take my kids to from 9 to 11, where I'm not dropping them off? I'm not adding something. It's the time I already have. So that's been a big piece of it for us.
Yeah.
How have you guys overcome because I know a lot of the times, a lot of moms just kind of hang back because they feel like, my kid might be cranky, or this is our nap time. How have you been flexible or overcome those thoughts that are saying like, no, you have to wait because, you're a mom and you have kids doing, you have to do this and that instead, or make sure they get nap on time or whatever. How have you guys overcome that mindset?
I mean, I think one of the things that's been great is having us both involved in it, because there's some accountability, and that's huge. I go through seasons where it's easy to go to the complex, and then seasons where I just don't want to. And having somebody to say, hey, you want to go to the complex today? It's a lot harder just to stay home than, just going. As the kids get older, it was probably, 2 or 3 years ago, would have answered it differently, because there are cranky times at this point. They're a little bit older, so they're a little bit easier, not quite as scheduled. But I think part of it is just having that accountability. The other part that I would say is, like, honestly, things always seem harder than they actually are. Even when the kids were little, it felt like a huge pain to go. People weren't napping, the kids were screaming, whatever. And then once we got there, it would be great, and we would never once leave wishing that we had not gone. And so that is a gift from the Lord, for every single time we go, to be able to walk away and saying, thank you, Lord, for, making me go. And for it to feel like it was a blessing, that it wasn't a wasted hour and a half or whatever. And so the next time when we would not want to go, having that background of, it's not going to be wasted. It never is wasted. It's always worth it. And, if you've got 2 kids that are cranky, throw them in a room with 6 other kids, and they're usually not all that cranky.
Yeah.
So, I think a part of it is having that perspective of, it's not as hard as you think it's going to be.
Yeah. I think Molly was always better at that than I was when I had little ones. Cause I'm way more structured. I wanted to preserve nap time. I very rarely ever found it worth it to get my kids off schedule when they were babies. I think we're done having kids, I think, for sure. But I think if I were to have a kid now, I would probably be way more open to that, because, you know, it does seem so overwhelming at the time, but they're so resilient, you know, and I never trusted that my kid would be resilient. It's like we miss a nap and the whole week is blown. And it's like, it never is to that extent. And, you know, I mean, every mom is going to find a different balance. There's some moms that are just super, just go with the flow, you know, strap those babies on into a, what are they called? Wrap, you know. Mine were always too big. Like they broke my back on that. So I like never could do that. But, you know, if you're that kind of mom, then, you know, you're going to have a way better, easier time, doing that. I was never that kind of mom. I was super structured. And so I think I would probably tell myself to not be, if I could talk to myself 3 years ago, but myself 3 years ago wouldn't have listened.
Right.
And it's okay to be that kind of mom.
Right.
Like I always kind of wish I was cooler and get more go with the flow. But I just wasn't. And so again, like I found ways to work around it. And like Molly said, it was never like, it's never the attitude, I'm only going to go when it's easy and, totally convenient, because then you will never do it.
Yeah.
And so there is there's got to be a both and, but just as an encouragement to the structured moms, like you don't have to throw all that out the window. Right. Be who you are, and
know that it won't last forever.
It's not going to last forever. You're going to be more free when your kids are older. It's okay. Like if it completely stresses you out and you are going to be utterly miserable by getting off schedule, then don't get off schedule.
Right.
But do know that a lot of good things happen when you stretch yourself a little bit, and when you stretch your kids a little bit, and they're really resilient. Like they really, really are. I just never thought that about my babies, that they would recover, and they're going to recover. And so it's a both and. It's just going to be easier for some moms than others. And I do think what Molly said about accountability is great. Like if it was ever just me doing anything, I'm going to sit and like eat cookie butter out of the jar while I'm watching TV. Like that's just what I'm going to do if you know, I'm left to my own devices. And so some accountability is great, and some people pushing up against those comfort zones are great. But you know, God made you in a certain way, and it's okay to operate within those parameters. You know, you don't have to be somebody else, but do be open to having your comfort pushed on a little bit, going, you know, when it doesn't seem utterly convenient. Nothing with a child is convenient. Nothing. And so just like, nothing's going to be convenient. So if you, like Molly said, there were times, you know, where it's like, okay, the kids are super cranky. And when you have some history built up, you say, all right, so I can be by myself and have two cranky kids, in my living room and just be sad, or I can have cranky kids out with my friend, blessing other people. Well, you know, they're going to be cranky either way. It's going to be hard either way. Let's go out.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of get to that place. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's good to be, I think that's awesome, because to hear both of you guys talk, because you're both different personalities. And then I know, like with my first kid, I was very like, things have to be A to Z, you know, I had it scheduled out, planned out. But then with my second one, I started to realize like I never left the house when I first went. So like I had to challenge myself to kind of be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, totally.
And and being okay. And just as a mom, I was like, I wouldn't care if another mom came over to hang out with me and her kid was cranky, or, you know, and so like, why should I care, kind of thing. And I think that was a little bit freeing for me the second go around, was that like, we're all just trying to figure it out. Like,
Sure. Yeah.
How do you think that the ministry has influenced your guys' families so far?
Well, my firstborn is 7 now, but he loves his comfortable things. He loves to know exactly what's going to happen. He's the kid at like 2 who wanted a calendar so he could see what was happening this month. Like, he loves to know what's happening. He loves to be, it's a control thing, which is, just name it. He is very uncomfortable in new situations. He does not like new people. Like, he greets with my husband at church, and now at the age of 7, he's finally looking at people and telling them hello, and he's been doing it for like 5 years. So anyway, I think with that question, I think about him. In the first, like a year and a half or something, we would go over it, and he would literally just sit beside me, would not say anything to anybody. Was just so uncomfortable. And then I remember like a V play date when we were over there just hanging out with our friend, and all of a sudden he just got up and started playing. Even went outside, like without me there, went outside with all of the other kids and just started playing. And that was such a gift to me. To see him, who is only comfortable with comfortable things, playing with kids who look different than him, kids who speak different languages than he does, kids who play differently. Like, our kids go to a university model school where there's 6 kids in their class. And so, the kids at this apartment complex are 100% different than him. And so to be able to see him finally with the Lord, just blessing him, to be able to see, like, it's okay that people are different. Like, they are still okay to play with. They're kids. They're boys who love soccer and baseball and all the same things that I love, even though they look different, sound different, play different, act different, who knows what they're learning out there. Right. Most of the time. But to be able to see just how the Lord orchestrated all of that, in part, for him to be able to step out in some of those uncomfortable ways at the age of 5 and 6 instead of, 18 or 20 when he finally is out of the house, hopefully 18, and, experiencing different people.
I echo all of that. In some ways it sort of remains to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are not, so my youngest is sort of like Molly's oldest. And so he likes his people. Sam, the oldest, like, hey, you're breathing. You want to be my friend? And so he's, comfortable. But he's been uncomfortable because he's not a big sports guy. And so I think, whereas Jack is like connected with the kids in terms of like sports and playing ball and rough, team play, all of that kind of stuff, Sam wants to draw. And so he feels a little bit uncomfortable, out there. But in terms of just meeting people, he's, hey, my name's Sam, you're my best friend. Ben is very different, more kind of what Molly was describing. He wants, he's fiercely loyal to his people. But if you're not his people, then he doesn't want anything to do with you. And so that has been interesting to see. There's certain folks out there that are now his people, like our original friend, and her kids are his people. And so he plays with them great, but he's still real hesitant when it comes to new kids out there. How they see the world. I think, I hope, I pray that, like Molly said, these transitions into interacting with people who are different than you, who speak differently than you, that look differently than you, have different color skin, have strange accents, different values, eat different foods. I'm hoping, I'm praying fervently that they will never know anything different than that, and so that their transition into young adulthood and adulthood will not be shocking to them. I think so many of us, not meaning to or wanting to, but we raise our kids with people that only look like them, and think like them, and have the same values and have the same everything. My parents didn't mean to, but I was raised that way. I didn't really have any friendships that looked appreciably different than mine. Family did. So it's a transition when you see that the world is a whole lot bigger than that. And so I pray that this will help them with that, they will see differences. I think it's silly. The concept of being colorblind or being culture blind or whatever is silly. I don't think it's even biblical. I don't think it's right. We have different colors. We have different accents. We have different languages. We have different cultures. That's something to be celebrated. So it's not that I want them to be blind to it. I don't want them to be blind. I want them to see it in a beautiful way.
Yeah. Right.
I hope that it will help with that. I don't know yet. They're too young to know, but that's certainly a prayer of mine.
Yeah. I think that, I know originally I came from California when I went, all the way from elementary to junior high in Orange County, to be specific. So it was a really big, area, multicultural, a lot of diverse, economically and, religion, skin color, everything. And then, in high school, I moved to East Texas, a town of like 4,000 people. So, and literally we had one, I think maybe two African American, kids in our high school. And me being one of the closest, because I'm half Mexican, I'm tan. So like I did not fit in, but everybody else thought it was so strange, like even me just being tan and everybody else was white. But for me, it was like, well, this is weird because, I was sitting next to like so many different children that was just life. And so for me, it was kind of the opposite, is that like, this is not life. Like, what is this? And then, so I think that being able to see, like, I like that you said that it's not colorblind, but it's being able to see each color and its own beauty, but that like we should all be able to surround each other and just embrace each other's differences and, see it as kind of a beautiful thing, not just, I like that. Do you guys have a story that you could share with us about maybe specifically that impacted you guys personally or your family that was related into serving at the North Hill? Or
I mean, I think
we're trying to choose. It's not that we don't have one. We're like,
which one do you share? Yeah.
Actually, I don't know.
Well, like Mary Claire said at the beginning, like, the big game changer was, being in the hospital room when our friend birthed the baby. That was huge. Like she said, just put a trajectory even on our radar as to what the North Hill could be. I just remember coming home from that, and I mean, both of us just like weeping and, just wondering what the Lord will do with that. And knowing that we were called to be faithful and obedient, and knowing that it would be scary because it just is, because we don't know what is coming next. But I feel like that is one of the biggest transitional, like, impactful stories. Yeah. And then you want to share?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I do.
This is like the most exciting thing right now.
So one thing we haven't talked about much is, the original story was our friend came over without her husband. And so we, embraced her and we were serving her and everything. And then I just remember we were talking at home group about how to serve her and love her. And I think I said something about like, she doesn't have a husband. So we need to, be her husband as a group and everything. And my husband, David, looked at me and he was like, well, why aren't we trying to just get her husband here? And it was like, ding, ding, ding. Molly or I, either one of us even thought in those terms because it seemed
we didn't know anything
impossible.
About that. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, like we can go hang out with somebody and serve them. What does it mean to like tackle a system that has him in a different country? Yeah. But that's the way, again, like bringing your whole family into it. That's the way my husband thinks. He's like a closet lawyer. And so he was like, well, why don't y'all start like looking into that? And so We did, and it was like I hated it. Because it just seems so impossible. So I think the first thing was we like took her and met with her case manager, and we're like, what does this look like? Like, her husband's not here. How do we get him here? And she just kind of looked at us with this hopeless, like, well, maybe you can try this piece of paper called an affidavit of relationship and fill it out, help her fill it out, and send it off. And so we're like, okay. And so we did that. And then nothing happened.
We were super naive at the beginning of it. And we were just idea. I mean, who can we call? Like, surely we can call someone and get this guy here. It can't be that hard.
We were like, we'll just tell them.
Tell them that they're to be here. So what's so hard about that?
It was, and then, so we have been on this other journey, along with just the North Hill and the family stuff and all of that, this other journey of learning about what it means to be a refugee in the world in 2016. And boy, we had no idea. It has been utterly heartbreaking just to learn about more about what's going on, in the world, and what refugees live through, what it means to be a refugee. I would, recommend that movie. What was it called? That movie? The Good Life.
The Good Life. It's like The Best Life.
The Best Life. The Good Life is a great movie. If you want to see what it looks like to come here. Molly and I cried through the whole thing. I think like opening credits, we were already crying. It was rough. But anyway, so that like was a whole nother journey of it seemed like a hopeless thing. And I don't do well with that. I'd rather if I have a shot at doing something in my own power and strength, then I'm going to put my energy into that, but don't give me a hopeless case. I don't do well with that. But we kind of kept, just throwing Hail Mary passes, to be honest, because everybody that we met with was like, this is not going to work. Single men from Sudan don't get processed. So it was really interesting in so many ways, because I feel like part of it, for me, it mirrored the Christian life, because I went through just personally the last 3 years, it was kind of like a roller coaster. Like she would get a piece of mail that would say something that would be from like the UN High Commissioner of Refugees about her husband. And my hope level would just go way sky high, and I would get all emotional. Molly was way better at staying a little bit steady. I'd be like, oh my gosh, it's going to happen. He's going to come. Da-da-da. And Molly's like,
and I'm like, no, he's not. They're totally opposite end.
But then, with my high, a few months would pass, and I would, get that hope crushed, or there would be just kind of like a tiny window. Like we would, throughout the last 3 years, we would just kind of be going along, and there would be just this like glimmer of hope, or something to do, like something. Okay, we've got another paper to fill out, or we haven't talked to the Department of Homeland Security, we haven't talked to the Department of State, we haven't called Congressman VC, and with each one of those, kind of hope would surge a little bit, and then we would feel, or I would feel hopeless, and she sort of mirrored that. Her hope would raise and then kind of go down, just in terms of the possibilities of him getting here. And really, though, along the way, a lot of people were just kind of like, this is really just not going to happen, or da-da-da-da.
And Mary Claire was so good through the whole process of never giving up. Like, along with her highs and lows, I've just been like, well, whatever. Like, I don't even know. I don't know. I'll throw my hands up. And Mary Claire has been so good about not throwing her hands up and figuring out what to do next, and what else can we look at, and who else can we talk to, and all of that. And so that's been huge.
But it really did. Like, there were times where I wanted to throw my hands up, and Molly was like, okay, well, we found this cousin that lives in Wisconsin or something, and she can testify that she was at the wedding. Like, I remember, when we first started, sorry, that's a long story, but, when we first started exploring this, we were like, okay, Alik. Oh, sorry, I'm probably not supposed to say her name. Her name. So we'd be like, hey, can we get in touch with the person who married you in the church? Like, or do you have what's the name of the church? And she's just kind of looking at us like with this furrowed brow, like, what do you mean? And like, well, if we can get, the name of the person that married you in the church, maybe they can write a letter. And she's just kind of looking at us and she's like, but there's no church anymore. And, we were like, what about the guy that married you? Well, he's dead. And it's like, I just remember that sinking feeling of like, oh, that's what it's like to come from a war zone.
Right.
She's like, I don't have, she's kind of looking at us like, you don't understand. Yeah. Like, that church is not there anymore. My town doesn't exist anymore. My family's dead, and we were just kind of like, oh, wow. It really brought home to us of course you can't write a letter to the pastor that married you, like you fled for a reason. And so, but Molly like tracked down some family and had them, sign a letter saying I was at the wedding. I was there. We, gathered up every picture that they had, which, I mean, his children look exactly like him. Yeah. Like he is their father, all of these things, and we're just sending them to any place that we had an address to, and all of that. And so I guess it was it a year ago, February? Yeah. Molly went to pick them up. I think they were coming to Sam's birthday party, right? Okay. So Molly went to pick them up and then texted me this letter from the UN High Commission of Refugees saying that her husband was accepted into the refugee program was considered a refugee destined for the United States. And I remember looking at that and, I mean, just falling to the floor, crying. And it has still to this day been the picture to me of the already not yet nature of the kingdom of God. Because with that paper, he was, he is accepted. His identity has changed. His destination has changed. His trajectory, everything he is legally, accepted. But it's been a year, it's been a long season of waiting. So while his legal status has changed and everything, the reality of who he is and how he is viewed by the government is different, upon receiving that paper, life didn't change that much. I mean, he's still in a refugee camp. Mm-hmm. She's still alone. She's still, but it was at that moment that there was a reason to hope for her, for us. It was like, this is a reality. The reality changed with that piece of paper, that legal document. Even though the situation is still exactly the same on a day-to-day basis, the reality of the situation changed. I will never forget that moment. And when the Lord the Holy Spirit put that together in my heart of what that looks like, in my life. And, so anyway, that was last February. And he is slated to arrive in DFW next Monday.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so that's a huge story, for us. And we can't wait. Yeah. We cannot wait. I anticipate that we've been looking forward to that day for 3 years. Yeah. And a week much longer than that. He'll get to meet his baby for the first time. He's now 3. When his family was separated from him, he had a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And now 9 and 5 and 3. Yeah. And so that's something for anybody listening to be praying for. We're so excited. It's going to be so great. It's the culmination of so many things, so many hopes, and dreams, and, just seeing what the Lord did. And we did not, from talking to people, not one of those pieces of paper was what did this. I mean, there's no anybody that looks at it from a legal standpoint is like, this is like a miracle. I mean, we talked to a lawyer at Catholic Charities who was like, I really cannot believe that this happened. So it was not us; it was totally the Lord. And we just kind of get along for the ride. Yeah. So that's going to be huge. But do pray. I can't help but think if I had been separated from my husband for 4 years, and I've had a baby, been raising my kids on my own for 4 years in a totally different country, new language, new culture, there's going to be some adjustment. Yeah. And so definitely pray for them. If anybody knows a great biblical marriage counselor that speaks Dinka. But anyway, so that's my big story. I think, or I would, collectively, for both of us. Both of us. That's a big story.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations. I'm excited for them. And hopefully everything goes well on Monday. And we'll be excited to hear the update about and hopefully some pictures. And
for sure. Yeah.
So if anybody would like to find out more about North Hill, or like you said, doing more than just, I know you asked for prayers, but doing more than just praying, like maybe somebody listening feels called to either volunteer or help out in other ways, how can they find you guys, and where would they be able to do that?
Yeah. We have a website. It's probably the easiest way to get in touch. It is thenorthhill.org. Right. Okay. So the northhill.org, we'll have all of our info, email addresses, ways to get involved, all that kind of stuff. So that'll probably be the easiest way. Yeah. We're on Facebook too.
Okay. So on Facebook, they can just search the North Hill as well.
Yep. Just the North Hill.
Okay. And then I just want to acknowledge you guys. I think it's awesome. I'm so glad that you came on and shared their, I know that I've heard you guys talk before and share this story, but I think just hearing it from this perspective, and especially with moms in mind, I think that a lot of the stuff that I have heard you guys speak has been influential to me and inspiring to me. So I just want to thank you guys for sharing your hearts and sharing your story. And I think what you guys are doing is great, and obviously life-changing. You have somebody's husband is coming on Monday, and I cannot, without you guys kind of being an advocate for God, I don't see how she would be united with her husband any other way. So I think that that's huge, and I just want to acknowledge you and what you guys are doing.
Oh, thanks, Ashley.
Thank you.
It's definitely been a gift to us, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we end, though, I do usually ask some rapid-fire questions at the end of my show for everybody. And I am a big advocate of kind of sharing what we're reading or sharing what we're learning with other women. So I wanted to ask you guys if you had a most influential book you've ever read, and what would it be?
That's a hard question, Ashley.
I know.
I'm sorry.
we reject your question. I'm assuming are you excluding scripture? Are you excluding the Bible?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that one's a given, but if you, whether you want to go like your favorite, your most inspiring mom book that kind of gave you a new eye on that, or whether it's a business one, or just kind of a, maybe like even a refugee inspired one that kind of opened your eyes a little bit more, whichever way you want to go, however you want to take it.
Yeah. I was thinking about the question, and, I feel like right now, if I read anything, it's like a book from the library on my phone, which is not super, inspirational. But I was thinking back to when I did a little bit more reading without all the children. And what the Lord brought to my mind when I was thinking about that is the books by Elizabeth Elliot. And I feel like that is probably the first, reading Through Gates of Splendor was one of the first times that I actually read about a ministry that was hard. I definitely did not grow up in a home where we did a lot of we didn't do ministry. And so reading about Elizabeth and Jim Elliot's just like pursuit of people in complete obedience to what the Lord would have them do without knowing, the consequences, what it turned out, good, bad, whatever, was, looking back at it, like super life-changing, and just giving me a perspective of what it is to actually do hard ministry.
That's good. My answer is probably not as good as that. I think this is a completely separate podcast. I'm a big reader and I love reading. And so that's like choosing a favorite kid or something. But I would say, like, for me, I think, I've read a lot of nonfiction, a lot of, parenting books and things like that. And I know that they affected me, but, and were good. I mean, John Piper and Tripp and all of those great things. But I am going to say that my most influential book ever was Anne of Green Gables, because what that did for me was open up a love of reading, a love of the story, because we're built for the story. We are story people. If you are a human, you're built for a story. You're built for the story. And so fiction and narrative and stories affect us in a way that is really unique and really special. And so when I read Anne, I related to her as a little girl, but it opened up a world of reading to me, and I've read a lot of great books. And I think that those great stories, especially the ones, like a Lewis or Tolkien or whatever, that mirror the great story, are what change us and mold us and give us character and get our eyes up off of ourselves. And so I'm going to say that book just because it opened me up to every other story.
I think that's great. If you guys could empower women or encourage women in a particular way, what would it be?
I think part of it goes back to kind of what we talked about with our relationship, is like, do what you're gifted in and don't worry about what someone else is gifted in. We battled for a while, like settling into what our giftings are and appreciating each other's giftings and seeing the value in each other's giftings. And I think that's huge, especially as a mom, like I said, back in the beginning, like with all these different temptations to compare ourselves to one another, being content and pleased with the way that the Lord has wired us and gifted us, I think is huge.
Yeah. I think that's really, really, really big. I would add to that by saying, just take one step.
Yeah.
You don't have to know where it's going to lead you, but one little step of obedience is all it takes. And so don't worry about the big picture in some ways, like especially if you have babies. And I would say, like, feel the freedom too of you are called by God to disciple those babies and your kids. And there's no shame in saying that is the only thing on my beam right now. Like, okay, great. Because I can't find a whole lot of evidence that you should be doing much else than that right now. And so feel that freedom without any shame in it whatsoever. But when you have the choice to take a step or to stay where you are or be comfortable, and just take that step. And you know what? If it's a misstep, if it's not the direction you need to be going, then you can always take the step back, But a little step of obedience here and there is going to, lead to really incredible things and an adventure. So do it. Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
If you could go back to your 20s and tell yourself one thing, what would it be?
Oh.
Well, but Molly,
Don't answer too fast.
I think in my 20s.
Yeah.
Gosh, I love the 30s. I do. I especially late 30s. Oh,
Careful.
oh my goodness. I am not scared of 40 staring down the barrel at me because I think I realized maybe, okay, if I was going to tell myself one thing, it would be nobody cares. Like in your 20s, and especially with this Facebook, Instagram world that we live in, people are not thinking about you as much as you think that they're thinking about you. So just do you, man. Mm-hmm. Don't care about it. And I say that in a non-cynical way. I'm not saying that in a fatalistic way. I'm just saying I wish that I had spent less time managing my image or pretending or worrying about what I thought I was supposed to be doing or supposed to be saying or supposed to be wearing. And I'm saying that as a person, I don't think I've ever been particularly enthralled by that, but I sure thought that people were thinking of me more than they were. You know what I mean? I mean, they're just not. And so don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. Just, there's a lot more freedom I have found a lot more freedom in my 30s in that arena. Mm-hmm. And I can't help but think that that's just going to grow. Like I want to be a little old lady that just does not give a darn, and that's just being herself. Mm-hmm. And, I love those people. So I want to be that person. And I wish that I'd been able to embrace that more in my 20s.
Yeah. I think one thing I would say is find your people and jump in. Piggybacking on what Mary Claire said, like, don't care about what, haters gonna hate. I sound like so late 30s. Haters gonna hate. But anyway.
We are so not cool.
Maybe that's why we're saying don't worry about what people think.
I know, because we know that we're not cool. Yeah.
Anyway, like, find your people and jump in and do life with them without worrying about what people think about you, without worrying about, who is cooler than you, any of that kind of thing. Because the 20s, I feel like, are such a huge time. You're trying to figure out who you are. I think if you can find your people and be comfortable with who you are at that young of an age, young in quotation marks of an age, then, man, you're on the right path.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I like that. Well, thank you guys for being on, and we survived a whole hour, and your kids are still playing, I guess. So
crazy.
Yeah. Little gifts from the Lord.
Well, thank you guys so much for being on. I appreciate you guys, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley.
I hope you guys enjoyed that episode, and it is super encouraging to be a late 20s like myself and to hear women that are older than me that just have knowledge about kind of, doing them. And like they said, haters gonna hate and you just gotta do you. And about surviving motherhood and pursuing other things at the same time, or being okay with not doing that at the same time. But I encourage you to check out their video of the reuniting of Alik and Diane, the story that they talked about during the podcast. It is super amazing, you guys. I have like tears. You need some tissues, because I watched it and like literally ugly crying the whole time. It just tugs on your heart, but it's just so good. And you can find that at todayseden.com/podcasts. So podcasts/007, and you can find all their show notes on that same page as well, links to their website, thenorthhill.org, and some favorite quotes that I got from the episode and pulled out. You can find those there. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you can, as with all episodes, get a chance to, when you're listening on iTunes, review and rate this podcast for me. I would truly appreciate it, and it helps out a lot. You guys, as always, I'm so honored to be able to have the time to interview amazing, awesome women and people who I feel like can influence you guys or provide some sort of something for you guys. So thank you for listening and supporting the show. And as you go out into the rest of the week, remember to do what they think you can't do.